My name is Patricia Dickinson, and I am an associate professor of teacher education. I work at Sanford College of Education, which is renamed National University. I don't know if we have any National University teachers out there. And I also taught at UCSC for a little while. So I do know lots of teachers in the county, both my own children's teachers and teachers that I've worked with as either a university support provider or as a professor. I've been teaching online since 2009. It's been a long journey. So I feel your pain. I know part of why we get into the profession is because we're people. We love being with our kids and interacting and having the conversations every day. And working remotely makes that really challenging. But I will be sharing with you some best practices that I use with my teachers and with my own kiddos that can help make some of the things that you love about being in a live classroom happen through remote teaching. So I'll share some of those tools with you today using Google Jamboard. So if you're already familiar with Google Docs and Google Slides, then using Google Jamboard is going to be an easy transition for you. It's part of the Google Suite, which means that anything that you create, whether it's a slide deck or a doc, can be easily shared with your students for use, whether they're working remotely, they're working in an asynchronous assignment. That means they're not with you in a live session, but they're working on assignment outside of the live session, or they're working in a synchronous session with you. So just like we're meeting right now, this is a synchronous session. I now need to go over Zoom etiquette. I noticed everybody came in and muted themselves, which was very thoughtful, but you may need to review some Zoom etiquette with your students, and that's natural. Of course, our students want to come in, they want to share, and they want to talk, but you want to just remind them of some of those procedures and structures before you get started with your live meetings. I did share a little bit about myself. I've been teaching for 20 years. I taught elementary and middle school, mostly for the Los Angeles Unified School District. I have a website, which when I'm inspired to write, I will write. I've been a little overwhelmed these past few months, like many of you, having to work full-time and also support my own 3 students. But we have a lot of fun. So if you check out my YouTube channel, you'll see a lot of my students, of my own kids, which I consider my students now, doing videos. We are working with the YouTube generation. They love to videotape themselves. They love to explain their thinking. And really, that's kind of at the essence of the Common Core, is when we can get our kids to talk, we can get them to teach each other, then they're moving into mastery of learning. So I encourage you to use that. And if you need some suggestions on ways that you can have your students do a flipped video of their own, I can make those recommendations at the end of our session. All right, so today we're going to be talking about Jamboard, both in virtual and in-person discussion. And you will leave this session with several Jamboards ready to go. I have a ton of Jamboards that I'm ready to share with you. So we'll just get started with talking about what is Jamboard, how you can get started, have you guys get a chance to actually try it like your students would use it. And then I'll give you some examples from the field and answer any questions that you have. All right. So as I shared with you earlier, it is part of the Google Suite. It was officially announced on the 25th of October, 2016. So it has some of the functionalities that you like with a smartboard. It looks like a virtual whiteboard. You can add images, you can take screenshots of your teacher curriculum boards and post them online. You can also allow your students to interact with the Jamboard, and I'll show you some of those ways that you can do that. It's a great way to build community with your students. So whether you're doing a morning check-in and they're writing their name on a little tab and sharing how they're feeling today, to students actually creating their own jam, and then collaborating and presenting on a topic. And you can kind of set the stage. So it's almost like creating your own template. Let's say you wanted to do students to present on what they know about a cell molecule, then you could take an image, they can label the parts, and then they can present their ideas. All right. So if you are in a synchronous mode, and let's say you want your students to find the area of this irregular shape, then you can go to a tool like Pinterest or your workbook. You can take a snapshot of this image, and then if you want your students to work with a partner and talk about how they would solve this problem, then they would just go to, you would go to the feature where you would just duplicate, which would make copies of the Jamboard. So let's say you had 20 students in your class and you wanted to have them work with a partner, then you would duplicate 10 of these slides so that everybody could work on their own slide. You could add a little sticky note at the top so your students would know which jam they were working on. So let's say I wanted to make a group and I wanted to have Kevin and Janelle and Sarah work on this particular slide, then they would know which slide they're working on. So again, if this is something that they're working on synchronously, and that way we can have a discussion about how they found their solutions, then I would go create the Jamboard. I just uploaded an image, which is very easy to do. And then I would click on these 3 dots and I can duplicate the slide. Now I have 2 of the slides here. Okay. And I can just change the names. So I have 3 different students working on this jam. And so what the students would do is they would have access when they're in their particular jam to use any of these virtual tools. So one of the things that I particularly like about Jamboard as opposed to using something like Google Slides is that students are going to have access to these tools that they wouldn't have in a Google Slide. So let's say that the students are working together and they want to try to figure out the area of this shape, then they can click on the pen tool and they can select the thickness of the pen as well as the color, and they can try to figure out the area. So I see this is a 5 by 3 rectangle, which would give me an area of 15. And this is 2 by 4, which would give me an area of 8. And then the kids would just add it together to find what the total area is. All right. So that's one way. Another feature of the Jam, which is really nice, is you have the background. So you can change the paper depending on what you want your students to be able to do. Now, let's say I just did a lesson on long and short vowels, and I want my students to, now that we've had our lesson, I've done some synchronous discussion with them and we had a chance to review vowel sounds. I want them to come up with a list of their own long and short vowels. I can select the background and students can work here and they can come up with their own long and short vowels just writing with the pen. If they want to type, they would use a sticky note, but they can also type so they have a preference. I think this tool is really good for K1 too because you get to reinforce the how to illustrate the letters, and They can type as well. So there is an option. You don't need any special Wacom pen or tool like that. You could just use your mouse. You can also, if you're working with students that might need visual images, you can just add an image just like a slide deck, very easy. Two ways. In the earlier slide with the math problem, I just took a screenshot from a site of a math problem, but I can also use the Google image search. So if I want to find a picture of a cake to help cue and prompt my students about a long A sound, I can do that as well. And that just gives a little bit more scaffolding for my students to help them, and it gets them excited about what we're doing. All right, so that's just kind of an overview. Again, the background can be changed. These are pretty much standardized. If you want to use dot paper, I was trying to find a way you could find, there are virtual dice. I was like, oh, this would be cool because they could make arrays. But I think you would need to split your screen so that you could roll the dice and they can make an array. But you could change to any of these backgrounds. So depending on what grade you're teaching and what subject area, what you might have them to. Okay, so let's go back to the presentation. I shared a couple ways, just very simple, that you could do it in a synchronous discussion. But let's have you guys try. So if you have a smartphone, there's a couple ways that you can use this. You can actually take a picture of this QR code and it will pop up on your phone. You do have to have the Google Jamboard app. Now the smartphone is going to give you some additional features. It actually has some AR, so that it would recognize what you're drawing and automatically turn it into a particular shape or text. You won't find that on the web-based version yet, but it probably will come. So I'm going to share this link, and let me just show you guys what I want you to do. Okay. All right. So you'll go into this jam, and this is a 20-slide jam board that you can pick any one if you want to use this in your own class. And it's just taking a little bit of time here because we have such a large group. But you'll see the slides once you access it, and it will say, would you rather, and I think one of them is eat pancakes or eat pizza. Here you go. There you go. So would you rather have pancakes every meal for a week or pizza every meal for a week? ¿Que prefieres tener panqueques o pizza para cada comida durante una semana? So it also has Spanish translation, which is great if you are teaching Spanish or you're working with second language learners. What you're going to do is you're going to click on one of these sticky notes, and then you'll tap the three dots, click edit, write your name, then click save, and just tell us what you prefer, pizza or panqueques. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing and allow you guys, I will also add that particular link to the chat. And allow you to just engage with Jamboard for a second. And I'll just give me a second to also review it, see if anyone has any questions. So if students are part of the G Suite, or if they have a Gmail account, Google account, You don't need to add any extensions, or you don't need to have any special tools to log in. It's not like using something like Edpuzzle or another tool where they have to create an account. It will just work with you in your G Suite. You can add a link to a slide, or you can add it to Google Classroom, and I will show you guys how I do that. Great question. Besides the sticky note, there's not another text box option. So if you want to use this on your smartphone, then you will need to download the Jamboard app. If you scan the QR code, it will prompt your phone to install Jamboard if that's something that you want to do. All right, so I'm just going to check in and see how everybody's doing. Looks like everybody is able to use the Jamboard. So I'm going to just take this erase tool and get rid of this line here. Great. And if you finish the activity, you're welcome to scroll through the other 20 slides on this Would You Rather deck, so you can kind of get an idea of how you might use this particular app or tool with your students. All right. So any questions before I move on and continue presenting? No? Okay, so I'm going to keep going. Okay. So let's say you've created a Jamboard. I just want to get into some of the other features. I actually made this one last night. I was a math coach, so I do love math, and I wanted to try this out with my daughter. Unfortunately, she was really tired, so we did get a partial recording. But this is a calendar activity. I love daily routines. I think it's really important for students to practice skills every day so that they can build fluency. And so with this particular gem that I created, all I did is just take images of one of my favorite activities, a calendar. I also found this particular August 2020 calendar on the internet. I just took a snapshot and then I added it. So with this activity, the students are looking at the number of the day, and then we would go through a synchronous discussion about today's number and recording in each of these activities. Now, when the students get to these images here with the stars and the money, those are kind of virtual clip art that I've created. Now, I do have a video on my YouTube channel if you want to know how to create your own virtual clip art. It's really easy. They're just images. So once I have the marker tool and I've written down and had a discussion with my students about each of these ideas, again, it's all aligned to first grade math standards, then I would click on the select tool. I've added these images of stars, and we're going to build the number 7 in our 10 frame. I'm just dragging it. Now, my daughter was able to do this. She's in first grade. Of course, I modeled for her about what it would look, what she would do. And so just like a Google slide, if I have a particular image that I want my students to manipulate, I would add the image like I showed you guys. And then I would just press Command C and then Command V, and it would duplicate that image. Now, one thing I actually discovered with images and using it on Jamboard is that you don't want to add a transparent image, because what it will do is it will go behind another image. So part of the reasons we were not successful with our video last night is because every time she was trying to drag the money, it would go behind this other image right there. So it was creating a little bit of an issue. So I figured out, oh, I just can't use a transparent image because it's going behind this other image. So now that I've made this beautiful calendar routine for my students and I've modeled it for them during our synchronous meeting, I want them to be able to practice independently. Now, whether that means that this is something that they're doing in their math journals, because as a teacher, I value my students writing and recording every single day, or I want them to do it in this Jamboard. What I would do is click on share, and I can copy a link. I can change it to edit, and they become the editor. Now that would help me during a synchronous meeting. But let's say that I want to download it as a PDF so that they can work on it while they're writing. They can do that as well. So I would just download it as a PDF and I could send it to them so they can print it out. I can also, if I'm working with Google Classroom, I can also add these Jamboards as an assignment to Google Classroom. So what I would do is I would go into my Google Classroom account. And then I would make it an assignment that I would share. So I go into Classroom. I click on my classroom, then I would say classwork, create an assignment, and calendar, math, give some instructions, add. And there it is. So just like a slide deck, it's going to assign this to all of my students. So they have their own copy, which is so amazing. When I was teaching, it was not able to, I had to manually make this. So now they're all going to get their own copy, so I don't have to worry about them writing over each other's work, which is amazing. I can add some criteria points and etc. in Google Classroom if I choose to do that. And now they're all assigned this particular one. Now, the only thing I have to be mindful of is that I'm using my template and not the one I just wrote on, because they're going to get my chicken scratch on it. And there it is. It's already posted here. Okay, back to the presentation, because I know we don't have a ton of time. Okay, examples from the fields. I'm just going to be honest. Some of these I just curated from Twitter. If you are a Twitter friend, how many people are using Twitter? I'm not sure. But if you go into Twitter and you just type in hashtag Jamboard, you're going to get an entire feed of ways that teachers are using Jamboard currently in their classroom. So I don't claim to be a content expert in every subject area. I'm just going to be honest with you. Some of these I found on using that hashtag, which I thought, this is cool. I'm not a science expert, but I think if I was going to teach about the body, this would be a cool way to do it. Students are adding sticky notes about, based on this prompt that the teacher created. I said, oh, this is cool. I want to focus on social emotional. I think it's really important. How do you see your place in the world? And then students are adding images. Here's another one that someone created for phonics. I love phonics. I think it's really important. And so the students are using the cards to make AY words. Fun, so they get to manipulate. All right, here's some additional strategies. If you are teaching math and you love Which One Doesn't Belong, dot talks for K2, estimation 180, and visual patterns. You already have an entire list of jams that you can use. So these are all going to be hyperlinked, but you will need to make your own copy. So as you can see in the top of my screen here, it says view only. So I just need to go to share. Oops. No, I don't. I need to go to the dots and click on make a copy. And that means I'm going to have my own copy that I can edit. And it will also be added to my entire Jamboard collection, which I have quite a few since I was preparing for this presentation. I feel like a jam queen. So now we have all of these Jamboards that I can use. And I can assign, just like I showed you. We can have synchronous discussions, or students can work on these asynchronously. And then maybe during our small group instruction, we can meet up and talk about why they picked, you know, the pink cookie as not belonging, or why they picked the basketball. So I love Which One Doesn't Belong. Lots of fun. So definitely go through all of those jams. Now I'm trying to find my presentation. All right, and here's a video of myself doing an upper elementary calendar routine. I showed you the primary one that I did. This is for secondary or upper elementary. You can make a copy of it, but I just videotaped myself here using Screencastify so that if my students need to work on this activity independently, they could just watch my video. So you want to just, again, click on this, and you can see the jam that I created for upper elementary. And then also there is a site called Math Reps, and they have more high school routines that you can use on Jamboard. All right. So again, taking screenshots, having students work problem solving, and having a discussion, which is what we'd love our kids to do in the classroom, we can do that using a tool like Jamboard. You can also create a very cute and artistic, a collection of a topic. So it would be a driving question board. If you're using the clues models, the students can look at a plethora of evidence and readings and research, and then make sticky notes about their big ideas. Here's what that looks like, super cute. Students can create their own jam to present to their peers. You can also take photos. I love when we are making real life connections. So if you're on a hike in Henry Cowell and you want to talk about the diameter of trees or about the phases of the moon, you can take photos and you can add your own photos, and then students can add a post-it, and you can have some really in-depth conversations about a particular concept. Okay. And finally, social emotional learning. I actually did this one with my math methods class last week. We looked at integer line, and the students had to place how they were feeling on the integer line. So you could do a student check-in with them. And so here's a whole collection of Jamboards that would just serve as a student morning check-in. Again, just like I showed you guys, you're going to click on the edit tool for the sticky note. Students write their name, and then they're saying how they're feeling. And then you can ask students to share about how they're feeling. This could be great for summarizing a big idea. How confident do you feel about this topic? Do you agree or disagree with the author's perspective? Thumbs up, thumbs down. Rate their confidence on an issue. And then how you're feeling today, talking about integers, right? I'm feeling pretty good today. I'm gonna move myself over here. Okay, so social emotional learning is really important. If you want, we're looking for a particular activity on creating a class community, here's a collection of Jamboards that you can also look at. This is a Guess Who Jamboard. This is from Matt Miller from Ditch That Textbook, if you've probably heard of him. And so again, so all you're doing is you're making one template, and then you can duplicate it and students can create their own. Adding directions to what you want the students to do is really helpful. It helps add clarity, and again, video casting can also add another layer of instruction. Critical thinking is also important and can be facilitated using a Jamboard. Here's my little Jamboard protege. Tell everyone how much you like Jamboard.
What's Jamboard again?
So you can ask students to, add images, share comments with each other. Here's what it looks like in a face-to-face class. So if you have a Promethean board and the teacher just drew lines and had 4 big ideas, graphic organizers, and then the students can either use their smartphone or you can record their thinking. All right, so I've done a lot of talking and we have about 10 minutes left. So I want you to start thinking about ways that you can use Jamboard in your class and create a space for us to collaborate. So you're gonna click on this link I will also add this to the chat. And think about some ways that you can use Jamboard as a collaboration and discussion tool. And I'll just stop sharing for a moment. So make sure you're adding your ideas to our Jamboard so that we can look at this as a reference. And I apologize, I forgot to share my screen for a little bit. So I want to hear from you. What are some ways that you might use Jamboard in your practice? Awesome. Oh, and another thing I forgot to add, as you can see, my little Bitmoji is here. You can actually, just like Google Slides, you can drag and drop a Bitmoji onto the Jamboard. Allegedly, it also works with Equato if you are using that tool. I haven't had success with that yet, so I wouldn't want to recommend it right away, but I'm assuming that they're in the process of making that integration happen. All right, so I see a lot of great ideas. Love it. I love the post an image of a phenomenon. That's awesome. And have students share what they notice and wonder. Really excellent. Yeah, so a lot of great ideas. I agree that math and science seem like it's a nice integration tool to get students to really use the language and have meaningful discussions, but using Jamboard as kind of a prompt to get them to think critically and also support their thinking. Great, so a lot of great ways that you guys are thinking about using Jamboard. Could be get to know you where all the kids are making their own little emojis and adding it on and doing their about me, or if you have like a activity that you do at the beginning of the school year template, you could always take little images of that, screenshot it, and then add it to your Jamboard as a template. Was there any questions before I go on about using this tool? Anybody want to feel free to activate your microphones? I know you're all being extremely polite. Did anyone have any questions?
I'm curious about how you link it.
Uh-huh.
You link it to a slideshow with a link.
So if you wanted to use this in a slide,
you embed a link into a slideshow?
Right, like how I did with my presentation. So right here, I added a hyperlink to the Jamboard. I'm on slide 24. I also added, from my own reference, the URL at the bottom of the page so that I could add it to the chat. If you are, say, teaching remotely and you are using a slide deck, you can also give your students permissions to view at the beginning of the session, which is what I did. So that way students have their own copy, because I do occasionally forget to share my screen when I'm talking. And then when I am presenting, it's not, you don't get to see the chat as much. So those are just some tips that I found to be helpful. I don't know if anyone else has other ideas they want to share. Feel free to jump in.
So they go to another site, and at that point, is it a collaborative Jamboard because you're giving them all the same link? If they're going to work on it?
Right, so 2 ways. If you are using Google Classroom, you can share the Jamboard. You can create an assignment, and then everyone would have their own copy of the Jam. Another way is that, just like a slide deck, you can give them the link, and you'd want to make sure that the link is set to view only. So let me just show you how to do that.
I would know how to set it to view only.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Yeah, but if I want them to work collaboratively, then I would have it made to edit, right?
Correct.
And
yes.
then come back, it would open a new tab when they click on it, and then they could easily come back to the meeting.
Right.
Okay.
And if it's if you're having them use it during a synchronous discussion, what you would need to do, like I was showing a little earlier, is that you would just write their names on a sticky note so they know who's working on which slide. And then you'll have a whole entire collection for reference. So let's say you're doing this particular Jamboard of Guess Who. There's 20 copies.
Mm-hmm.
So the students can, you can share this Jamboard and go through each of the students' work and have a discussion.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Can I ask, I'm a little confused. You said, why would you set it to view only then? Because then they can't. add anything to it?
Yeah, you wouldn't want, I think that was a mistake. If you want them to edit, you would definitely want it to be an edit.
So is there any time you'd want it at view only?
I guess if you were just making, if it was a copy like this, you know, if this was my template that I don't want students to write on.
Mhm. Okay, so most of the time it wouldn't be view only then. I'm confused. Okay, I'll figure it out.
Right, so this view only would be if I don't want my students to write on it while I'm writing on it. If I'm just modeling for them and I don't want students to actually go into the Jamboard while I'm modeling, because they will, and they'll start moving stuff around just because they're bored, then you want to make sure it's on view only. So
Okay.
right now it's in view only. Oh, this one's actually an edit. So I'd want to change it to view. And for myself, if you are working with teachers as well, and you're doing professional development or sharing with your staff, you would want to make sure that it's in view only, which would force them to make a copy so they're not working on your copy. Because if you're doing an activity like this, and let's say I'm just working with kindergartners, I don't want to have all of this. I might just decide, hey, this is way too much for my students. I'm going to take out half of these things. Or I might just start with 3 or 4. I'm not going to do 10 more and 10 less. They're not there yet. So you can, once they're in view only, then they make a copy. And then essentially the teachers would be able to delete each of these things or move them around or make it their own. They might not like the language here. They might want to use different terminology that's familiar. All right. Any other questions? Again, I really like the idea that it's pretty seamless with Google Classroom as an assignment. If you are using Google Classroom, I don't think it would work with Seesaw. So that would be something that you would take into consideration. But if you are doing a synchronous meeting, it could be a tool that you have your students work on while you're meeting synchronously and having a discussion about the particular concept. Okay. And that is pretty much it. Are there any questions or other things that you guys want me to share while I'm, anything else that was percolating? Thank you so much for supporting our kids. They love their teachers. Like I said, I have 3 kids in the school district. I'm not sure if there's any New Brighton teachers out there, but my son loves New Brighton. And the principal there is phenomenal. So we're just very blessed to have you guys working with the kids. They're really excited about going back to school. Here's some additional research connections if you're looking for some additional research, the research behind using digital tools. There's some additional free resources. Again, hashtag Jamboard will give you a plethora of additional ideas. If you're looking for social emotional learning, National University does have free lessons on SEL for students that you can access as well. And here's a hyperlink to that. And Loyola Marymount also has some digital tools and resources for both students, teachers, and parents that you might want to check out. And that's also hyperlinked in the presentation.
I came in a little late, and did you send the link to your slides?
I did add it in the chat, but I will add it again.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I just asked that same question in the chat. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries.